They buried their twin daughters, until a homeless boy whispered, "They're not in there." Money can buy a lot of things. Can buy a fast car. Can buy a glass skyscraper. Can even buy a politician's time. But as Ethan Carter sat in the dirt, he realized money was useless against a piece of cold, gray stone. The names etched into the marble were Lily and Maya. 3 months ago, his 5-year-old twin daughters were the heartbeat of his home. They were the sound of tiny feet running down the hall at 6 a.m. They were the sticky handprints on his expensive windows. Now they were just 2 dates carved into a rock. Beside him, his wife Claire was a ghost of her former self. She didn't speak anymore. She just existed. Her hand was pressed against the wet grass, her fingers trembling. "They were dancing on Friday," Ethan whispered. His voice was thick with a pain that no doctor could cure. How can 2 girls who were dancing on Friday be gone by Sunday? The doctors called it a tragic medical anomaly. A sudden, silent failure of the heart. It was a clean explanation. Too clean. But Ethan was too blinded by grief to see the cracks in the story. Until that morning. "You're crying for the wrong people, mister." The voice was small, but it cut through the cemetery silence like a knife. Ethan turned. A young boy stood a few yards away. He looked about 8 years old. His clothes were oversized and covered in grease stains. His face was thin and he wasn't wearing shoes. But his eyes, they weren't the eyes of a child. They were the eyes of someone who had seen how the world really works. "Who are you?" Ethan asked, wiping his face. The boy didn't answer. He pointed a dirty finger at the grave of Lily and Maya. "They aren't in there," he said. Claire gasped, her head snapping up. "What did you say?" "The girls," the boy said, his voice steady. "The ones with the matching yellow ribbons. They aren't dead. They're just waiting." Ethan stood up. His expensive black coat was ruined by the mud. But he didn't care. He walked toward the boy, his heart starting to beat with a rhythm that felt like terror and hope at the same time. "Don't play games with us, son," Ethan said, his voice low. "This isn't a joke." "I don't know any jokes," the boy replied. "My name is Leo. I live at the place where people go when nobody wants them. And I see your girls every night." Ethan reached out, grabbing the boy's shoulder. He tried to be gentle, but his hands were shaking. "How do you know it's them?" "Anyone can see their names on a headstone." Leo looked Ethan straight in the eye. He didn't flinch. "Because of the song," he said. Claire let out a choked sob. "What song?" Ethan whispered. "The one about the moon and the silver boat," Leo said. "The small one, Lily. She sings it to Maya when the lights go out. She says her daddy used to sing it to them every night before the bad sleep came." Ethan felt like the earth had just opened up beneath him. The silver boat. It wasn't a popular nursery rhyme. It was a song Ethan had made up himself. He had never recorded it. He had never sung it outside of their nursery. There was no way this boy could know that song unless he had heard his daughters sing it. "Where are they?" Ethan's voice was a growl now. The grief was being burned away by a white-hot flame of protective rage. "Tell me where they are, Leo." Leo looked over his shoulder at the cemetery gates. He looked scared for the first time. "The gray house," he whispered. "On the edge of the industrial district. The sign says it's a warehouse, but it's a cage. They brought them in a black van 3 months ago. They told everyone the girls were orphans from the fire." Claire grabbed Ethan's arm, her fingernails digging into his skin. "Ethan, he's telling the truth. He has to be." Ethan looked at his wife. For the first time in months, her eyes weren't dull. They were wide and alive. He turned back to the boy. He pulled a thick roll of cash from his pocket. But Leo shook his head. "I don't want your money, mister," Leo said. "I just want them to stop crying." It's a loud sound for such a small room. Ethan put the money away. He looked at the grave one last time. He realized now that the perfect tragedy had been a perfect lie. His daughters hadn't died of natural causes. They had been stolen. And whoever had done it had made one massive mistake. They had left a witness. "Get in the car," Ethan told the boy. "Where are we going?" Leo asked. "We're going to get my daughters," Ethan said. "And then, I'm going to find out who built those graves. The drive to the industrial district was silent. Ethan drove like a man possessed. Beside him, Leo stared out the window at the tall buildings. He looked at the leather seats of the car like they were from another planet. In the back, Claire was holding a small, stuffed rabbit she had kept in her purse since the funeral. She didn't cry. She just stared ahead, her jaw set tight. There, Leo said, pointing to a building that looked like a tomb made of rusted metal. It was the gray house. No windows on the first floor. A high fence topped with barbed wire. A sign on the gate said industrial storage, but there were no trucks. No workers. Just a heavy silence that felt wrong. They keep the kids in the basement level, Leo whispered as the car idled a block away. There is a side door near the trash bins. The lock is broken, but the man with the keys sits in the hall. Ethan looked at the building. He was a man of boardrooms and contracts. He wasn't a soldier. But looking at that dark building, he felt a cold, hard strength settle in his bones. Stay in the car, Leo, Ethan said. Claire, stay with him. No, Claire said. Her voice was sharper than he had ever heard it. I am going in. Those are my daughters. Ethan saw the look in her eyes. It wasn't a request. He nodded once. They stepped out into the humid air. The smell of oil and rot was thick. Leo hopped out too despite the order. You'll get lost, the boy said. And the girls won't come out for you. They're too scared. They think everyone is a taker now. Leo led them through a gap in the fence. They moved like shadows through the tall weeds. When they reached the side door, Ethan pulled it. It groaned but opened. Inside, the air smelled like bleach and old soup. They walked down a narrow hallway. At the end of the hall, a man sat on a plastic chair. He was scrolling on his phone, a heavy ring of keys hanging from his belt. He didn't look like a kidnapper. He looked like an ordinary man doing a boring job. That made it worse. Ethan didn't think. He didn't negotiate. He walked straight up to the man. The guard looked up, surprised. Hey, you can't be. Ethan's fist hit the man's jaw with the weight of 3 months of mourning. The guard slumped over, the plastic chair cracking loudly. Ethan grabbed the keys before the man even hit the floor. Which door? Ethan hissed. Leo pointed to a heavy metal door at the bottom of a concrete flight of stairs. Ethan unlocked it. The door swung open to reveal a room filled with cots. It was dim, lit only by a single flickering bulb. There were maybe 10 children in the room, all of them thin, all of them silent. Then, from a corner behind a stack of crates, a small voice started to hum. It was a slow, shaky melody, the song about the moon and the silver boat. Claire let out a sound that was half laugh and half sob. She ran toward the corner. Lily? Maya. 2 small figures huddled under a single gray blanket sat up. Their hair was matted. Their faces were smudged with dirt. But when the light hit them, Ethan saw the blue eyes of his daughters. Mommy, Lily whispered. She sounded like she didn't believe her own eyes. Claire crashed to the floor, pulling both girls into her lap. She buried her face in their necks, weeping openly now. Ethan dropped beside them, wrapping his huge arms around all 3 of them. I've got you, Ethan choked out. I've got you. You're coming home. Maya reached out a small, trembling hand and touched Ethan's face. The lady said you went to the stars, she whispered. She said you didn't want us anymore because we were broken. Ethan's blood turned to ice. The lady? What lady, Maya? The girls looked toward the doorway. Leo was standing there, guarding the exit. The lady with the pretty hair, Maya said. She comes on Tuesdays. She smells like roses. She told us to be quiet, or the takers would come back. Ethan looked at Claire. He saw the same realization hit her. The rose perfume, the pretty hair. Victoria, Ethan whispered. Victoria was Ethan's business rival. More than that, she was the woman he had passed over for a major partnership years ago. She had lost millions because of him. He thought she had moved on. He thought she had settled for a different life. But she hadn't wanted his money. She had wanted his soul. Suddenly, a loud clack echoed through the hallway. The the sound of a heavy door locking from the outside. A woman's voice came through a speaker on the wall. It was calm. It was elegant. It was Victoria. "You really should have stayed at the cemetery, Ethan," the voice said. "It was such a peaceful ending. Now I have to deal with a much messier one." Smoke began to hiss through the vents near the ceiling. It wasn't fire smoke. It was thick, yellow, and smelled like chemicals. "Leo! The back way!" Ethan shouted. But Leo wasn't looking at the vents. He was looking at a small gold object on the floor near the guard's chair. A brooch. "She's here," Leo whispered, his eyes wide with terror. "She's in the building." The yellow gas curled along the ceiling like a hungry snake. "Ethan, the girls!" Claire screamed. She pulled her sweater over Lily and Maya's faces, pressing them into her chest. Ethan's mind raced. He looked at the heavy metal door they had just entered. It was electronic. Victoria had cut the power to the handle. They were trapped in a basement that was quickly becoming a gas chamber. "The vents!" Ethan yelled, looking for a way out. But the vents were too small for an adult. Leo stepped forward. The small boy wasn't looking at the gas. He was looking at the back wall, behind a heavy industrial shelf filled with rusted cans. "There," Leo pointed. "The laundry chute. It goes to the alley, but the flap is bolted from the outside." "I'll break it," Ethan said. He didn't care about the pain. He slammed his shoulder into the heavy shelving, grunting as the metal groaned. With one final, desperate shove, the shelf toppled over with a thunderous crash. Behind it was a small, square opening. "Leo, go first," Ethan ordered. "Open the flap from the outside." The boy scrambled into the dark chute like a shadow. A moment later, they heard the sound of metal kicking against metal. Clang, clang, snap. "It's open," Leo's muffled voice echoed back. Ethan lifted Maya, then Lily. He pushed them into the chute where Leo grabbed their hands and pulled them through to the fresh air of the alley. "Claire, go." "Not without you," she insisted, her eyes watering from the chemicals. "Go. I'm right behind you." As soon as Claire disappeared into the chute, Ethan turned back. He saw the guard's phone on the floor. He grabbed it. He didn't call the police yet. He called the one person who would be watching. Victoria answered on the first ring. "Is it getting hard to breathe, Ethan?" she asked. Her voice was like silk. "I wanted you to feel exactly what I felt when you ruined my firm. Suffocated. Forgotten." "I'm out, Victoria," Ethan hissed, coughing into his sleeve. "I have the girls. I have the boy. And I have the guard's phone with your incoming call recorded on it." The line went silent. The elegance in her voice vanished, replaced by a sharp, jagged edge. "You have nothing but a story. Who will they believe? A grieving father who went mad? Or a woman of my standing?" "They'll believe the boy," Ethan said, crawling toward the chute. "Because he's been watching you for 3 months. And he has your brooch." Ethan scrambled through the chute, falling onto the wet gravel of the alley. He gasped, his lungs burning as they hit the cool night air. Claire was there, holding the girls. Leo stood in front of them, holding the gold brooch Victoria had dropped. Suddenly, bright headlights cut through the darkness of the alley. A silver sedan roared toward them, tires screaming. It didn't slow down. It was aiming straight for the group. "Move!" Ethan tackled Claire and the girls behind a stack of wooden pallets. The car slammed into the pallets, wood splintering everywhere. The driver's side door opened. Victoria stepped out. She wasn't the polished woman from the business magazines anymore. Her hair was frantic. Her eyes were wide with a desperate, localized insanity. She held a small silver pistol. "Give it back," she hissed, looking at Leo. "Give me the brooch. Give me the children. This was supposed to be a clean slate." "It was never clean, Victoria," Ethan said, stepping out from behind the wreckage. He held his hands up, keeping her eyes on him and away from the children. "You stole 3 months of their lives. You built a cemetery for children who were still breathing. You're done." "I am Victoria Hale," she shrieked. "I don't lose. You already lost." A new voice joined the conversation. From the end of the alley, 3 police cruisers turned the corner. Their sirens silent but their blue and red lights painting the brick walls in violent colors. Victoria turned, her face pale. She looked at the police, then back at the small boy standing by the wall. Leo didn't look scared anymore. He looked at her with a quiet, devastating pity. "The man in the hall told us you were a queen," Leo said softly. "But you're just a thief." Victoria dropped the gun. The metal hit the pavement with a dull thud as officers swarmed the alley. As they handcuffed her, she didn't look at Ethan. She looked at the twin girls. Lily and Maya were hiding their faces in their mother's coat, safe and alive. The trial was the biggest scandal the city had ever seen. The dead twins were the lead story on every news channel. The doctor who signed the certificates was found in a motel 3 states away. He had been paid $5 million to lie. The hospital administrator was arrested. The web of corruption Victoria had built with her wealth was torn apart piece by piece. Victoria was sentenced to life without parole. 6 months later, the Carter mansion was no longer a tomb. The windows were open. The sound of a piano echoed through the halls. Lily and Maya were in the backyard, chasing a golden retriever through the sprinklers. They still had nightmares sometimes. They still checked to make sure the doors were locked. But they were laughing again. Ethan stood on the porch, watching them. He felt a hand on his arm. It was Claire. She looked healthy. The ghost was gone. "Where is he?" Ethan asked. Claire pointed toward the big oak tree at the edge of the property. Leo was sitting on a branch, a book in his lap. He was wearing a new pair of sneakers and a clean shirt, but he still preferred to be outside, watching the perimeter like a tiny sentry. Ethan walked out to the tree. "Leo, lunch is ready." The boy looked down. He still had those old, wise eyes, but there was a light in them now that hadn't been there in the cemetery. "Mr. Ethan?" Leo asked. "The lawyer came by today. He had a lot of papers." Ethan nodded. "He did. They're adoption papers, Leo." The boy went very still. He closed his book slowly. "You don't have to do that. You got your girls back. I'm just the kid from the gray house." Ethan reached up and put a hand on the boy's shoe. "You're the boy who stood up when the world told you to be quiet. You're the reason my daughters have a father. You aren't just a witness, Leo." Ethan's voice softened. "You're a Carter, if you want to be." Leo didn't cry. He wasn't the type of boy who cried easily. But he hopped down from the branch and did something he had never done before. He hugged Ethan. "I'd like to stay," Leo whispered. As the sun began to set, the 5 of them sat down at the table. It wasn't the family Ethan had planned. It was a family born of a tragedy and saved by a miracle. Ethan looked around the table. He realized that money could buy a house, but it took courage to build a home. And sometimes, the person who saves your life is the one the rest of the world has forgotten to look at.